Hi, everybody. This is Tim Keefe and my good friend, Andreas Wieman, and we are here to talk about our SDSS podcast, renamed from Banter Cast. Hopefully, all of you have picked up a copy of our book, Stop Doing Stupid Shit. We'd love to hear your feedback on it, but here today to talk a little bit about AI and the wonderful world we live in. Good morning, Andreas. How are things there in Tampa?
Hey, good morning.
I guess I
Yeah,
just doxed your location. You're in big trouble, man.
no worries. Not anything that a little LinkedIn sleuthing probably couldn't figure out in like half a millisecond. So no worries.
No, that's true. That's true. So how are things? What did you think about all the headlines this week with Sam Altman being out at the OpenAI?
Yeah. I mean, I can hold my breath and see what's going to happen next on it because we'll probably hear about it when we all wake up, Monday morning this week. But I think it's kind of interesting too. But I think it kind of goes back to if you look at the beginning of the year, maybe getting into the latter part of 2022, when OpenAI, the whole hype around Gen AI was kind of coming out. Um, we talked about, and this is in the our book, right? Stop doing stupid stuff. By the way, right? I think is the right name. Um, but we hit on, in all seriousness, we hit on aspects like Gen AI or bits that make up machine learning or just AI overall. And how do you make it just practical and usable? And as much attention as OpenAI got for ChatGPT, everybody got excited, which is good. You need excitement so you have adoption. But then once you have that adoption, how do you retain that adoption and how do you make it useful? And that's exactly what we talked about is how do you figure out, at least on the business side, right? How do you figure out how you have mass adoption, but useful mass adoption? How can you figure out how to augment um, the personnel using it or interacting with the tool? It's just another tool. As cool as it may be, I just see it as another tool. It's no different than we used to be centric around, on the CX side of things, taking phone calls. Well, then chat came out, and then we got excited about
Right,
that.
right,
Did chat and then
right,
messaging, asynchronous messaging, etc. It's just another tool. So how do you make it easy to
right.
use for the practitioners, for the users, and then make it valuable for the customers, the end users. So that's it's just kind of interesting how this whole cycle has like gone up and down dramatically. Like it's almost like a TV script that somebody wrote. But I think it gets back
Well,
to how do you make it useful?
yeah. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I feel like, God, I wish I knew what the buzzword for 2024 is going to be so we can be ahead of it. But I mean, how many earnings report, earnings calls, announcements do we see from company after company after company? We're implementing AI as part of our product.
Right.
And I was kind of waiting for the AI supported tuna can to come out, but it's just one of those things where you go, okay, that's great, but what does that really mean? And this is where I think it falls apart. And there was a couple of stories I read, I think it was last week or the week before, and they were talking about where AI is actually being implemented and what does it mean. And there's not a lot of real big success stories, at least the way this article is describing. And most of it's because most companies really don't have the data that really supports AI engagement with their customers, even in a support mode, like the intelligent assistant, which was a conversation, what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
Right.
You and I even pitched a couple of projects on intelligent assistant. And I think we're back around on that cycle, which is, as you keep saying all the time, it's a freaking tool. And you got to use the right tool in the right place for the right outcome, right? If you try and hammer a nail with a screwdriver, you might make it work.
Exactly.
But at the end, you're not going to be happy with the outcome. I mean, you may have fulfilled the engineering requirement of the nail is in the wood, but in terms of every other aspect of it, it's a fail. And this is what I think we struggle with sometimes with these tools. And then you get the mandate from sometimes the C-level suite saying, in order to be relevant in the market, we have to have AI in our product mix.
Right.
Okay. And then we run around trying to force fit something that we're not ready for. And the next thing you know, you have a bunch of irate customers who are
Right.
now not getting what they think they should be getting because of this. And then you have to recover from that. So Again, I think this is where we got to be talking to the customers. And more importantly, I think sometimes we got to be talking to our employees who work with the customers and
Yep.
make them part of this conversation because they're the ones who know.
Right.
I mean, you don't know if you're sitting in a corner office and on the 20th floor, you don't know squat about your customers. You know, you get reports, you get CSAT reports that says 95% of your customers are satisfied or very satisfied, and everybody gives a high five. But what does that mean on a day-to-day basis? What does that mean to the customer who walks into your store or shopping on your website or is engaging with one of your agents over chat or on the phone? And if you don't know that, you're pretty clueless to what's going on in your business. And I think this is where AI is going to help first, right? Really
Yeah.
be able to gather that information and look at that information because look, I, I don't I don't have to say it, but we've been doing this. You've been doing it for a couple of decades. I've been doing it for a couple of decades more. I've heard this story so many times, and I'm still wondering what it is that customers are really saying. We've
Yeah.
had voice analytics for 10 years, 15 years. I've yet to see a customer sentiment report that was actionable.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
don't know.
mean,
What do you think?
I
I
I
mean,
can I can fill up a whole nother cast here on that topic alone, to be honest with you. But I think you brought up something that's really meaningful, and we're kind of at that intersection for we have all this hype around Gen AI, just AI in general, right? And I think the critical juncture that a lot of companies need to look at is who is the parties they need to focus on first to solve or at least attempt to solve for what you just pointed out as the issue. I think it's two things: the users, so the agents, right, the frontline population that's going to be using the tools. Because what we're seeing right now is you have a bunch of inputs being given to designers on the tools, and none of them are from the front line, the actual users. Why don't we actually go talk to the
right,
people that are
right.
going to be using it every single day? It's really that simple. But hence stop doing stupid shit, right? That's one of the topics in there. The second thing, the second thing, and this is the most
Trademarked,
critical.
by the way. Trademarked, by the way.
It is 100% trademarked. You can get a mug and a t-shirt soon, or a hoodie if you like hoodies like me. But the other thing is,
Yes,
and
go to
this,
our when you subscribe, we will give you a link to our merchandise page. That's for sure.
yeah. But here's the other thing that I think, and again, you mentioned reports going out, like reports and Excel spreadsheets and Google Sheets, whatever. But the other, what I see as critical role is like data. I'm going to generically say data scientists, right? Now, I'm assuming there's all kind of data hygiene that's occurring before it gets to, the product of the AI that it's going to be applied to or wherever it's going to be applied. But data, and it's taking that role of the quote unquote data scientist, but operationalizing that data that they're getting in new different ways that make sense to the party it's going to, not just this super high level aggregate view that doesn't really explain or story tell via the data what's going on with your customer, with your employees. Like you just brought up
Right.
automated QA. I call it automated QA, right? Transcribe two sides of the conversation, the customer side and the agent side. Do you know that if you have vocabulary variation to a certain, let's say, beyond the three standard deviations from an agent, that is one of the highest indicators that that agent's going to be quitting soon? And I think everybody has a problem with attrition and building up tenure and retention, right? Nobody typically knows that. Every time I talk to a client, bring that stat up, they're like baffled by it. But that's what the data can tell us. There's so many clues that the data can give us, so we can stop leading from behind and being reactionary and be much, much more outcomes oriented
Oh
and
man. Yeah.
preventative of things that are going to happen and predicative of what's going to happen, but doing it in practical ways, not doing it in magic bullet, ocean boiling ways, just very practical, everyday ways. That's where I think the data scientist role, or whatever you want to call them, that role is going to play a critical part in actually operationalizing all these cool possibilities that we
Yeah.
have with all the great tools that are out there.
But one thing I do, and this is that's a pet peeve of mine about, and it's not about data scientists per se. It's the fact that we ask someone who knows nothing about a business or about what a moment in the day looks like to look at data and make interpretations about it. I mean, data scientists can be very good at saying that that here are, here are things that drive other things, but they don't understand. Many of them don't
Right.
understand the business itself. I think this is where operational managers need to become educated in some of
Yeah.
this stuff, or be given better ways to understand how to use this data in real time. I think what you just talked about a second ago, when you talk about attrition, you talk about likely to attrit, you got to look at, and there's both sides of that, right? Like there's the customers likely, are they likely because of their behavior and the vocabulary, et cetera, to be, to be walking away as a customer? And when do you have the right authority to act for an agent to actually affect that conversation? Because if all the agent can do is say, I'm sorry, I agree with you, this sucks, but there's nothing I can do about it, which I've been on those calls, you've been on those calls as a customer, it's not good for anybody, right? It's not good for the agent because they're just getting blasted by, somebody like me, or it's not good for the customer because they don't feel that they're being treated personally, proactively, in a way that makes them feel like a customer, right? They're just the source of revenue to whoever this vendor is. And I think if we can start to use that data to be able to flag, even to the agent in real time, like, well, this customer is moving over into red, and hey, we're going to give you some insights based on their lifetime value on what you can do to address this problem. Even if
Yeah.
the address to the problem is, hey, can I give me some time and I commit to you that we'll get back to you, and deliver on that promise. That can actually be a nice way of a timeout and the commitment to contact and referral. And people go, well, that's not scalable. And you go, yeah, but how many times does the customer actually really follow up on you giving them your personal contact information if you really did? But what the reality is, the customer just wants to feel like they've been heard and that there's an opportunity for their issue to get resolved. And if the
Or in
agent
that,
or your representative, yeah,
no, I was just going to say
go
real
ahead.
quick on that. To your point, I think that it's 100% valid. They want to feel heard. It's about how can you. We do CSATs surveys like crazy, and then we never actually implement anything meaningful. We just try to push for a high CSAT target, regardless of the outcome of what is it to that business, the P&L benefit to that business, so they can then continue to iterate and strengthen the P&L delivery of it. The customer wants to be heard. What does that mean? That you can take, and maybe it's not that agent, that frontline agent, because you get into service level and staffing, all of that. Why don't you have a back office function that says, okay, here's what the customer really wanted. Here's someone in the back office function that can still solve the customer's problem and then update them later on. There's so many different ways to solve for that problem and make it scalable. To your point, I like to focus on things that are scalable 100%. I don't like to focus on one-offs. And even when I do focus on one-off, I go back and look at what is the positive ripple effect that we can introduce something that's scalable. That's what the data can give us. And it's not even starting with, a lot of IT stacks that are out there right now when you're talking about third-party outsourcing partners to a client or even clients themselves. It's like a moving mountains to get something introduced into the tech stack. So even something that isn't real time, but data that can show you the trends that are occurring right now that you can put in, and I'm talking about just exporting Excel spreadsheets and running, if you can feed it into Power BI, data visualization, or, Google Looker Studio or something like that, that helps with the storytelling to the party that's maybe not data educated, right? But you can still figure out what is going to happen to a certain degree of certainty with this data and do preventative actions, do interventions to stop those events from occurring. If we can get to that
Which
point, what we have right now, and every company has, I haven't come across a company yet that can at least do that. It's going to be a different kind of course that I think a lot of companies are going to take in 2024.
I I couldn't agree more, and I think that ability, we now have the ability, right? I think the tools are all there. Now it's a chance for somebody to take the Lego blocks and build the right model out of it. But really being proactive. Why do customers constantly have to escalate? Why do they have to ask for help? Why do they have to call in the first place? Right. That's what we should be looking at and creating value around that. And when I say call, you and I tend to fall into a contact center discussion. But almost every company out there has some degree of contact or service center requirement, whether it's on the escalation side or whatever. And how they handle that is probably the single biggest impact on customer attrition, which also ties to employee attrition, right? So
Yeah,
I don't know. I
think
mean,
about it.
but rolling this back to
Just real quick on that quick one. I know we're coming up on time here, but to your point, Tim, this is transferable or scalable to, as far as I can tell, any customer experience interaction or job. Think about drive-through times and service levels at like McDonald's or Burger King or something like that. What we're talking about right now, there's still ways to capture data and figure out how can we make that customer experience better so the customer has more repeat business. Well, no, I'm not debating the health side of this, by the way, on fast food, but how can we figure out how can we improve drive-through times and order accuracy? And we have all of the data to capture that and the tools to give that back to the employees so they have a continuing education and training to actually do all of this, not just some memo that's sent out that says, hey, do it faster so our drive-through times improve. So there's 100% transferable benefit, I think, to every customer experience categorization that's out there.
Well, and it's interesting too, because one thing, we're actually bidding on a couple of very interesting international projects where it's government, and and the goal there, of course, is to improve the experience of the citizen and their ability to get access to government services, et cetera, whether it's education, health, and I think it's the same thing. That ability to have clean data. Start with clean data. Problem number one, right? Like in so many companies, is that they clean. Well, not really. So clean, understandable data that actually reflects the information that we need.
Sorry, not to cut you off. Before we even talk about clean data, let's start with data. Because I don't think there's a lot of companies or governments that even do that. Their data-driven decision making is non-existent. So start with data and then make sure it has a high level of integrity. So
that's pretty good. I actually did a short video on that a couple of months ago about the new 4-letter word in corporations is data. Because everybody bitches about it. And I think all the different cloud solutions have created new data problems because they all define data fields in different ways across different applications, and trying to get end-to-end views can be very challenging. I know we've gone off topic here a little bit, but I'm just kind of bringing it back to what we started off with was AI. It's been almost a year now of people talking about AI and how it's going to change everything. I think both you and I are still sitting here going, yeah, nice tool, has a lot of application. It's got constraints on how it should be applied. And other than getting it to, write some emails for me, which, by the way, I think ChatGPT is a very powerful and very handy tool for, people to augment their own abilities to, whether it's writing or gathering information or pulling stuff together to help them move forward faster in their own work. But which is great, right? Like a very quick, you mentioned it in an offline conversation about, wow, when was the last time we saw a state-of-the-art technology become so consumer accessible so quickly? So this is really pretty unique. I think it's great. I think people have already misused it when they're using other people's content and describing it as their own, et cetera. And there's a lot of risk there. And obviously in entertainment, that was a big point of the strike that I think is just ending. But it's going to be interesting, right? It's still here. It's a tool that's going to be used like so many other tools and misused. But let's make sure that you and I and our clients and the people we work with, at least, we focus in on creating real value out of the AI tool.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, sir. Well, as always, hope things stay nice and comfortable in warm, sunny Florida. Meanwhile, out here on the West Coast, or the best coast, as I'd like to say, we're starting to get that winter weather, which is a little cooler, but we're enjoying it. So everybody, have a great day. Thanks for listening to us. And pretty soon we'll be subscribing and we'll be selling the merch. So keep us in mind. And remember, stop doing stupid. Fill it in.
Fill in the blank. Agreed. Appreciate everybody's
All right.
time,
Thanks,
and
everybody. Thanks,
we'll talk
Andreas.
soon. All right. See you, Tim.
Take care. Bye. Bye.